Welcome to the day 4 of the second edition of Mastercard's EMEA Sustainability Week 2023. My name is Andrea Pražáková and I lead Foundry, ESG and Gaming for Eastern Europe and Middle East and Africa at Mastercard, and I am your host today. Some of you might have been with us over the last 4 days. So on Monday, we discussed circular economy and the power of Web3. On day 2, we unpacked how technology really became powerful in driving sustainable choices of consumers. And yesterday we had 2 incredible guests, and we discuss how to help and integrate and communicate ESG strategy and to build it into the fabric of the products and services. So if you missed any of these sessions, please watch out on LinkedIn. We will publish all the recordings. Today we have a super interesting topic. We will uncover how space economy became the new frontier in sustainability, and I hope you are as excited as I am to talk about this. Please use the chat. I just open it up to put comments. I use the Q&A for questions. Yesterday we had quite plenty, and we will try to answer them during the session or in the end of the session. Maybe you can, test the chat if it's working. And when you think about space, what comes to your mind? Please feel free to use the chat while I'm talking. So, by the way, did you know that the space economy today is worth about $440 billion, and it's projected to grow to about 1.4 trillion by 2030. So the commercial space revenue represents about 80% of the total space activity. So these numbers might seem to be high, right? But I think it only shows the early adopter size. I think the opportunity is much bigger than that. And, Forbes pointed out that currently there are about 10,000 companies worth of $4 trillion specializing in space manufacturing, satellite communications, space tourism, and other areas. So in my personal journey with space, started about last year through a dear colleague of mine and friend, Ina Vanka, and through a Mastercard engagement with NYU, where we co-created with students on payments in space. I have to admit that space economy, to me, like to many others, maybe even in the audience, who are not deeply involved in that area, never represented a traditional opportunity for business. After hours of exposure to this topic, and of course a course on new space economy at MIT, I am now humbly calling myself a student and an enthusiast. But most importantly, this exposure to space, what it did to me is that now, every time I'm looking at some problem, I am actually, seeing the opportunities completely different. For example, any applications, I'm asking myself, could I use satellite images? Could I use satellite data for anything, verification? It is incredible what exposure to a different topic really does to you. So I hope that today's panel will not only open your eyes how new space technology can enable sustainable actions on Earth, but also will make you super curious to learn more about how it can help your business and services today. So I have 2 great panelists with me. There was supposed to be one more. I hope that Rick will be able to join us. But before, without further ado, let me just go straight into the introduction. My first guest is Cezar Rujan. Cezar is a serial entrepreneur with extensive experience in sustainability, space application on Earth, space economy, and decision intelligence for land management powered by AI and satellite. Just before we opened this chat, we were talking about how we could use data centers, and Cezar was talking about sending, connecting satellites between different, between London and New York, and how it would travel at the speed of light. It was amazing. Guys, I wish you would have heard our conversation. He's leading projects supported by space agencies and developing multi-generation plans for the sustainable use of space assets for entrepreneurial economy. So Cezar is also a member of a European Center of Space Economy and Commerce. He's focusing on developing globally scalable geointelligent companions, working with government agencies, international NGOs, R&D, and private organizations, also organizations like ours, especially in United Kingdom, USA, Nordics, CE, MENA, Australia, India, East and South Asia. And he's based in Norway, but currently he is in Romania. So super delighted you were able to join us. I can't wait to hear a little more about your work. My second guest is Hans van der Woud. Hans, I hope I pronounce your surname right. And I love Hans's slogan. So Hans's slogan goes like this: 110,000 minds at the ready. And it's very intriguing, right? So he's a founding director of BlackShore, and he calls himself, as a parent of a little big brain child, Cerberus. This is a award-winning crowdsourcing platform, which he and his team turn satellite imagery into maps, data labels, so we can all better understand disaster or humanitarian threats, for example. But what I found really intriguing for me was that, especially because I also lead gaming, is that the key ingredients in his solution is gaming. And gaming, he uses gaming to motivate the crowd and e-learning and to train them. And I really can't wait to hear more. So nowadays, the platform has about 110,000 trained players. That's where the 110,000 obviously number comes from. And it's branching out and growing, fast in different fields such as agriculture, sustainable land management, USSDG goals, security, forestry, and more. All these projects are equally interesting where Earth observation data is being enriched with crowdsourcing generating knowledge. So over the past years, Hans gained extensive experience in solving problems using Earth observation data and the discovery of viable business strategy. But success, even more importantly, by failure. I really like that, right? Because we debated it yesterday with our other panel. So Hans, super amazing. You could join us as well. I'm sure audience is already very curious about this space gaming approach. Probably many of them learned it from the first time. So let me start, Hans, with you. If I say BlackShore, right? What does BlackShore do? Can you explain it to the audience and break it down?
Yeah, thank you for having me here today. And how you mentioned me is already really good, so I have nothing to add. No, not really. The thing is, I founded BlackShore 11 years ago, I think, already. I founded it because of a challenge, because of a space challenge, actually. And at the moment, I was not working with Earth, but I was working with planet Mars. And we have NASA satellites. So first we are going into hardware to space. So NASA is a satellite, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and is making images of Mars. And we can zoom into Mars at like 25 centimeters. So really ultra, very high resolution. But NASA has a challenge with this data, this Mars data. Those images are not turned into maps. Maybe a little bit, but there's so much data available, there is no research capacity to analyze all those pictures. So at the time, still at the university, I thought, how can we turn those Mars pictures into maps? So I started learning a little bit about crowdsourcing, and still not related to Earth, but I think, crowdsourcing is using people, is using like a hive mind to turn data into knowledge. So around this Mars data, I built a very early computer game. And in this game, I inserted Mars images. And in this game, I added like motivational elements. So people must like it because I want the people to turn the Mars images into something important, to discover things on Mars, like traces of rivers. But I also added to the game, what was really important are e-learning materials, educational materials. So I had to teach the people about Mars. How do you recognize a river on Mars? And if you teach the people and if you motivate the people and you ask people, can you click something on those images in Mars? And like if 10 people say, hey, I've seen a river, or I think there was a river, and you combine this data, the output is a map. So, and all this data together, you can start building a combined map. And this is where our human intelligence is really good at recognizing things in pictures. Now, with this Mars ID, I ended up with the European Space Agency. At the time, I just wanted to work in space. I think, Mars is really cool. I still think it is cool. But the European Space Agency said, okay, your Mars ID, can you turn it around and maybe use this data to look at Earth? And because on Earth there are challenges and like disasters, what you already said, or food security issues. So we turned this Mars method around, teaching people about Earth, bringing them a game experience, and using what people see from space on Earth, and turn that into Earth maps. For example.
So can you go a little bit deeper in it, because it almost sounds like a Pokemon, right? When you go and find something in a space. So this game-based crowdsourcing, how is it connected to the sustainability on Earth?
Yeah, so yeah, of course, with Pokemon, you really go somewhere physically. And
Yes.
so you go to a coordinates and you have to find a big Pokemon, you're standing in the field. However, our game, you just play it from the living room for your iPad or whatever. And like any type of casual computer game you play or on your phone. And we just share a little bit of satellite imagery. Actually, we reconstruct, if you talk about metaverse, pieces of Earth in a game engine. It is in 3D, and we ask people to explore and click on things. Like last year, we did a project for the African Development Bank, which was to measure the positive economical impact of investments. The African Development Bank has installed a lot of motorized water pumps, dikes, refurbished wells, roads, and we were asked, okay, can you now notice what is a positive impact? How is it going in those areas in Africa, in Niger in this case? And what we saw, we can compare things over time. We saw a much richer agricultural environment, for example, much more green, larger trees, more trees, better roads. And we asked the crowd in this case, okay, yeah, can you look for this vivid vegetation? And the output is then a map of this project area. And then we see, well, it has really improved. It has really improved. It is much better than 6 years ago. It was actually very positive news in this case.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I stay with that culture, Cezar, when I look and I was very intrigued about some of your positioning and to help farmers, right? Can you explain to us how Mega Optimal uses satellite imagery and satellite data to help farmers?
Well, we're basically helping them optimize their land management decisions, essentially advising them on which cultivars or crops or actions they can take at the right moment to maintain their number one asset, which is their soil, whilst maximizing revenue. And basically, we use a combination of multispectral data and synthetic aperture radar data, as well as data from weather satellites. And we get to, based on that data, we get to advise them on when and where they need to make a decision. Because every farmer knows that every square meter in their farm is different. Just like every doctor knows that every patient is different.
Different, yes.
But what also every doctor knows is that even though every patient is different, the signs for a specific type of disease or the signs for health, they're very similar across most humans. And it's the same for crops and for farms. And we help farmers keep track of all those features and symptoms, as well as changes over time. And here there's three main aspects. It's where things are in relation with each other, and that goes with supply chains, right? You want to grow tomatoes, but are you in a place where you can sell tomatoes? Then there's how to identify that you have an issue, you have a yield disrupting issue in time to act. And even though you can be a farmer with a small field, or you can be a cooperative with a large surface, it's hard to do everything with drones, for instance. Drones are phenomenal because they give you ultra high resolution data,
Yes.
but it's expensive to get the coverage. I'm not going to even get into the plane part. So with a satellite, you can see that a problem is developing at a specific location, and you can further investigate, for instance, with a drone or with a in-person inspection, and take the right action. And in some cases with the satellite, you can actually see that, well, it needs more water, or it's the best time to plant, because you can see the chlorophyll when you watch in the multispectral way. You can see what kind of light the plant keeps and what kind of light the plant reflects, and that can give you a lot of clues on its state of health. So as a farmer, you wouldn't have these tools to begin with. Even if you're using a drone, it's hard to get the multispectral camera and to figure this out. So then the third aspect is how to choose the crop and the right methods regarding on your soil, regarding on all these like different kind of features. And this can vary from selective treatments or selective spraying or selective what's it called, irrigation. You can manage your water to maximize because the clay content can differ, the soil type can differ, and even though it might not be visible when the field is barren, you can start noticing these things when the crop is there or the cover crop is there.
So, you know, I'm sure that the audience now thinking, I mean, if they're obviously non-space specialists saying, I had no idea that you can actually, you know, use satellite images in so much of detail in that. But I think that the second question, which would naturally come to everybody, is to say, let's assume I'm a, you know, a farmer in India, right? Tomato, you said tomato. So tomato farmer in India, right? Who has maybe a simple device, right? And he is a great farmer, but maybe his or her literacy levels are not high. How do you translate all of this super valuable information to these farmers in a way that they can actually consume it and act on it, right? Because the way how you would explain, many farmers would not even understand. They would not even know where to start. So how do you, you know, bring it, translate it into a language, which if I'm a farmer, I would know what to do with it?
Well, that's what we're doing. We're working with agronomic research institutes. So we're working with the scientists, and we are transforming all this information into simple actions they can take. Go plant there, go look there. So location and time-based actions, because like the main issue is being an agronomist is as hard as being a doctor. Sometimes you actually have less tools that a human doctor can have on their patient to figure out what's wrong with your patient, which is like the crop-soil combination. And we are well aware that smallholder farmers and small farmers, family farms like the one you mentioned, they can't afford to hire an agronomist, or they're insufficient agronomists that can serve them to the public. So we've done two things. One, we are looking at how to give them simple advice, simple actions. And second, we're making a two-way communication platform with the agronomist. So once the farmer, let's say that there's an entomology, there's a pest issue, right? There's something that's killing their plants, and they want to learn how to contain it. And they need to talk to an agronomist. So what we do is we can send the agronomist their in contact with the area that's affected, along with, let's say, a picture that the farmer took of the pest. So that can inform the farmer that, well, they need to buy 3 liters of this, and do this, this, and that in the simple way.
I like that. You know, I never heard anybody saying that agronomist is like I will steal that phrase from you, you know, shamelessly, that they are the doctors on earth, right? Because I think that that's really fascinating, because I think we never see that way, that, you know, that actually earth is
So
something to take care of as a doctor. So that's really brilliant.
soil is such a difficult patient. So
Yes.
to form a full layer of soil from A to O, you need like 60,000 years. And the microbiome of the soil, the mycelial network, all these things, they can be completely destroyed by an action that one farmer might
It's
think
a wrong
that
action. Yes.
it's improving yield. So let's say they put too much glycophosphate, and what they could do is they could use a smaller quantity, but with a different pH in the mixer, and that little action can keep their soil healthy and make them spend less money.
So I want to go now back to Hans, right? I mean, we heard now from Cezar. I mean, these are super practical examples of applications of this space technology on such a micro level, right? And I know that you are also very much involved in the agriculture industry in whatever you're doing. Can you highlight some of these projects which you're working on, and how do you solve these sustainability goals utilizing your technology?
Yeah, it is really interesting. But the micro level is very important, and yeah, I do know a little bit about both levels. So I don't know that much about soil, but what is really nice that Cezar is talking about, our recent last project, it was the first time we used a satellite where we can zoom in to 30 centimeters. So really far, and that is also in Niger, the impact mapping project. And this allowed us to see people going to the market. It was in a town in Maradi, and we saw the adjacent agricultural areas. So, and knowing people are going to the market, and we see agriculture is going well, and then we know, well, it is going pretty good in the region. However, if you go to different levels or you zoom out a little bit, there are regions under stress. And so this was really like a micro project, looking at the people going to the market. But a couple of years ago, we did a project in Mali, and there we did more like a macroscopic project. And our task was in Mali, 10,000 square kilometers, to map villages. Where do people live? And a lot of sources don't actually know where people live. And our task was just to find there are communities in Mali, and how is it going with the soil, the terrain? What is the difference between 2011 and 2015? And what we saw in this area, well, we found the communities, which were not yet on any map, and there are a lot of communities out there. And what we saw is that the area was getting browner, drier over time. And so we saw, well, yeah, if an area is getting brown, well, there's less moist around. You can't grow your products. And what we simultaneously observed is that the communities which we found, we saw the communities to grow. It were like little petri dishes of bacteria, and you see them larger. But more people together in a city and less workable area for your agricultural products, it could cause stress in regions and conflict, so to say, and that is not a good situation. But an eye-opener here was that a lot of people say, well, it is probably climate change, it is getting drier, it is getting warmer. But this project led to like an unexpected discovery, and in this area there were big irrigation systems, and around this area was the river, the Niger River. I think that is the name. It is some time ago.
Yes.
But those irrigation systems, we asked the crowd, can you start following the systems? And the systems ended up in a very big walled area. So in big areas with a wall, which is like a province level on size if you compare to the Netherlands. But within those walls, there was vegetation, and very healthy vegetation.
Right.
What Cezar was saying, with using the multispectral data, we can see, okay, how healthy is the vegetation, how much moist is available in the leaves. And we saw that all the little agricultural fields out outside the walls, they were really barren, and nothing was really growing. But within the walls, it was really healthy. And the thing was that it appeared to be like sugarcane plantations. And sugarcane is used for biofuels and to make green energy. And the green energy is exported to like Europe or other countries. And then, in Europe, we think, oh, well, we are really green and it's really good for the environment. But like sugarcane is the #2 water consumer in the world related to vegetation. And I was thinking, what are we doing here in Mali? And it was actually quite a little bit striking on how are we wrongly using the soil in Mali. And I think probably it is just better to use conventional oil for our cars than doing this by sucking the country dry, because we see the little potato farmers getting dried out, and conflict is not good. So
it's really fascinating how you're connecting, and I like how you touch on the topic in Europe, right? That many times we obviously do this from a position of, a first world country, right? Position of privilege, where in Europe you think you're doing so well, right? Because you use biofuel. But ultimately, I don't think that anybody thinks that today, with help of satellite images, you can actually clearly determine that in these places where you plant the sugarcane, they then destroy the area for a traditional farming, right? So what might seem to be positive on one side, on the other side is obviously not doing good. And back to what Cezar was saying about, if then I know when to plan, what to plan, and where to plan, I can then, even with the help of your technology and the satellite image, navigate the people which markets to go, where is the food shortage right now, right? And where is the overflow of food, right? But I interrupted you. This is super fascinating. So what happened afterwards?
Yeah.
Were there any actions? Did they stop planting the sugar canes? Or if I look at the satellite images today, are they still the same?
Of course, it are always my projects lead to more questions than solutions. And all we can do in this case is, of course, we just measure it. We show the truth, right. And we discovered those communities, and they're not in any data set. So currently Facebook has them, but we compared our data, for example, with the World Bank data, and the World Bank data did not show their communities here or other population databases.
Go ahead.
So we always think that data of big organizations, that it is really good and it is really valid, but we should always, I think, critical, is it valid? Isn't it based on old models? And now with satellites, we can just see them and basically count the people, and we can update those models. And if those models are better, you can better make your decisions or strategies as a start. And it starts with measuring. And what Cezar is saying, okay, we should really surgically measure our own land plot, which is very important. But simultaneously, we also must use these tools to just measure country scale, global scale. And for this, space is a super powerful tool, and there are entire fleets of satellites allowing us to help us in this case, both with free data, open data, but also sometimes commercial data, so you need to buy a little bit. But I think we can use this as such a great resource to better measure our own planet and do great things.
I think, listening to, and before I ask the next question, I think listening to it, right? I think that also many people ask themselves, okay, I'm in a, I don't know, production environment, banking environment, whatever. Every company today should, from my perspective, have, on addition of the people they have, sustainability officer, data officer, and a space officer. They need to have somebody who actually understands what's happening in the space technology and how can they utilize it in order to benefit. Because these simple examples, we zooming in obviously on one specific sector, which is agriculture, right, which is impacting our earth so much. But I think this is really, really fascinating. And staying on that, Cezar, the agriculture, forestry, and land uses, contributes about 13 and 21% of global green gas emissions, right? This is massive. And, you know, emission of nitrous oxide, methane, you know, that makes over half of total greenhouse emission from agriculture, which is what's happening today. How, you know, the solutions which you have today, how can the data today be, you know, utilized to, for example, support carbon farming, right? I mean, because the point which you mentioned was more on the social part, right? That the farmers obviously have a good life and know when to farm and how to farm. But if we stretch it further, right? And because there are today in many places, especially Europe, where you have farmers who specialize in carbon farming, there are multiple different methods. And then you want farmers to farm not only at the right place at the right time, but farm sustainably. How can you, how could you use the satellite data for that?
Well, there are some missing pieces there that are going to be filled in soon. Basically, the European Space Agency is going to launch a radar satellite that's in the L band. What does that mean? It means that the radio is able to penetrate the tree and then reflect back. And based on calculating that return signal, you can actually calculate how much carbon is there in that tree. So once we have those new tools, right now we could estimate with the tools we have right now. So we see this is a tree. We can see how big it is, how green it is. We can estimate it should be holding this much carbon. But once we have this L-band satellite in orbit, it's going to be moment of truth for all those green bond projects where they had the forestry offsets. And we're going to see exactly how much carbon is stored in the tree mass. That's like for forestry. So that's really going to help greenwashing, fighting greenwashing and figuring out how much carbon is there being actually stored in the forests. Then going to the agricultural component, soil health, like healthy soil holds carbon. It's a great carbon sink. So adopting practices that improve soil health and stopping soil erosion, that's something that's going to help diminish that carbon footprint. Because right now, there are practices that are very short-term focused and on yields. Of course, yields are crucial because we need to have healthy, sufficient nutrition for all people on Earth. But something that is not that known is that 80% of the food on the planet is produced by family farms. A lot of them are smallholder farmers. So educating those family farms on good practices that maintain their yield, but also don't pollute, that's the solution there. And what we have is, we have situation, I'm sure everybody here heard about agricultural runoff, where even though no square meter is the same on the farm, it's treated like it's the same, and the exact same quantity of fertilizers are dumped, and the soil doesn't have the capacity everywhere to absorb it. And then it rains, and then it goes into river systems, and you have algal blooms well, everywhere where the river goes in the ocean, and lakes, etc. And that ends up releasing methane, and it causes this. It causes a huge contribution in the greenhouse gas emission.
Yes.
So that's helping farmers use less to get more is the solution for better. And that can also be eventually be a component of the issuance of carbon credits, because if a farmer
That was my next question is.
If a farmer can prove that they use less, because most fertilizer is made from fossil fuels, from fossil fuels, sorry, from natural gas or oil. Yeah, so if they use less, then it's a lower footprint, because they look at the upstream as well. So that could lead to that. And then going back to the L-band satellite, that can prove how much carbon is actually stored in a specific place. And I would wager that some smart scientist is going to figure out how to use that satellite to also figure out how much carbon there's in soil.
Because there is a lot of discussion around, especially wet farming, right? Where you say if you do a wet farming, that's obviously less carbon emissions, but you need to be able to determine how much water actually is in the soil to then being able to measure that, right?
Yes, and those kind of satellites, because they're more penetrating, they can help you. S-band, L-band satellites, they can help in figuring out what's the moisture level of the soil.
Yeah. I want to stay a little bit on the credits, but I was just thinking, not only on the credits, but if I look what both of you are doing, right, that me as a farmer, right, let's say not only farmer who plants vegetables or olive trees or whatever it is, right? Even if I breed chickens, for example, so I could utilize the satellite data to drive certification, right? So if I know, let's take Austria, because Austria is always famous for the Milka chocolate, right? And you see there these purple cows, which obviously never existed on these beautiful Alps, right? So with a satellite imagery, I can, to Hans's point, see how green is that place, how many cows are they actually, they're not inside a building for 24 hours a day, right? What is the space in terms of square kilometers these animals have, and how healthy is the food which we're eating? So you could actually really utilize and validate the certification for me as a farmer. If I have, even though cows are obviously not really the best example, I just realized, but let's say chickens are the same, right? But so not only the carbon credits, which we will be just talking about, but even the certification, right? I just want, Hans, what's your view on that?
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, you now have those new EU regulations for coffee farmers, that if you want to export coffee to Europe, you must prove there hasn't been like any deforestation for this coffee farm.
Great example.
You can perfectly use satellite data and go back into the archives, because we have archives. You can both in there, you can reconstruct the history of a land plot. And you can use this as a validation, and for example, put this into a blockchain.
I wanted just to say, use the Web3 technology, right?
Yeah, and then you know something, and you can, and then this farmer can safely sell his product to the market, to Europe. And I think that is a really great thing, and I think you can really make things more fair, also of course for this farmers, because you can track everything from field to fork or coffee cup or whatever. And but I think starting with space data, where it is coming from, is a very important starting point of this chain, of course. And I think that is super interesting. And if you're talking about blockchain, and I have to say, I always have been quite a skeptic. I'm not really a fan of crypto, but that's basically because of this whole mining stuff. That if you use it for different things, and in my case, I'm even thinking about like crowd validation, because blockchains are all about validations.
Yes.
Validate this with crowdsourcing data or a trained AI by the crowd, then you can do your thing and start. Then you have a foundation for a type of chain to sell coffee or other products.
And Cezar, I'm really interested, but I think you can also use it, right, for validation for issuance of the credits, right? because then you have
Yes.
exact provenance on the blockchain, which says which validates all the inputs and outputs, and then is able this to say, you know, feed the image. Did this happen? Yes or no? If yes, issue the credit. So Cezar,
Yes.
I see you've been burning to say something as well.
Yeah,
This is so exciting.
Going to your cows example, it's not that bad. If you use S-band satellites, you can actually do things like counting cows. And for a government authority that's giving out subsidies, for instance, in a region,
great, that's a great example.
It's much better to do a one-time pass or do 3 passes with a satellite and use an algorithm to identify and count cows in this case, and see that if there's a big mismatch between the number of cows and the subsidies they're paying. And this is the kind of thing that should trigger an inspection, because going to scope 3, for instance,
which is
in
the most
Europe,
difficult, right? This is the most difficult to manage. Yes.
You have those inspectors driving around and spending time and counting cows and doing things that they could basically spend their time better. And they could go basically where they know there might be an issue. Yes. So rather, satellites and intelligence allows you to not have a shotgun approach to things and better use resources. And now also with the aging population around the world, we are going to have fewer and fewer people to do things like this. So we need to start already developing and deploying these technologies.
Yes, so let's go to the carbon credits, because we've been going around now for a while, right? And I'm just burning to ask, right? So, you know, it's a big buzzword, right? Carbon credits, right? And it has positive and negative association. But what I would want to know, I mean, you know, Hans, I start with you, right? If you look at the technology and how can you, you know, utilize it properly to be able either to validate or you know, in connection to carbon credits, because this is something which potentially can enable farmers to have additional income and also to motivate them, right, to farm more sustainably and be, you know, use whatever is at their disposal.
Yes, so as I say, I'm not really like a carbon credit expert as being in using it, but I do of course know things about like measuring volume from space or Woud volume or whatever. Mostly in all of our projects, usually we have like a client, and the client wants to find something or wants to have something mapped. And a very big project we have just completed was creating data labels for wheat production in the Mediterranean region and in Europe, and the durum wheat, where the pastas is coming from. But we also always add more, and we add natural vegetation. Those are just trees and forests and whatever. And for this, we also created like data labels for the use with artificial intelligence.
Right.
Because we use a crowd to create like hundreds of thousands of examples. This is what wheat looks like, olives, wine, mining, energy, but also natural vegetation. This is what you can serve like to systems what Cezar is using, like with the S-band. I don't know anything about this new satellite or with radar, but we know the locations of trees examples, of vegetation examples in certain areas. And then you have like can have your automatic systems to just measure the cubic meters of how much forest is there. And this you can turn, of course, into carbon volumes. How much is there? And yeah, then going, if you go below the soil, well, I'm out. I don't know anything about that with carbon. So you again have to be with Cezar.
Okay,
and,
so
yeah, but you can see a lot. And I think it is also like a lot of common sense. And yeah, eventually what we do is like measuring, starting with square meters or square or cubic meters. But yeah, you can just see it and measure it and then turn it into a data format which you can use as a representation for
for it.
credits,
Yeah.
of course.
Yes.
And of course, it is your own farm. Yeah, we can know it then for your own farm, what is going on and what is growing on your farm. If you see like the trees are becoming bigger in Niger, well, we see there's more carbon stored there on those farm plots.
Right.
Yeah, basically it's then quite simple actually to measure that.
So, Cezar, so to you, how can you use that and the data which you have for carbon credit validation or issuance?
So what Hans said is I agree completely. There's again two aspects here. So you can measure the amount of carbon, and soon we'll be able to measure the amount of carbon with higher accuracy, much higher accuracy. But then there's dealing with that carbon, because carbon in a tree there's always the risk of it being released due to a forest fire, as well as the carbon in the soil. If there's soil erosion, that carbon is going to be released. So you can support the manufacturing sector into using that biomass, not only for biofuels, but also for construction material, and making sure that the right trees are cut from the right places and the right crops are grown in the right places. One of the things we deal with is desertification and soil erosion. One of the ways to deal with soil erosion is to use cover crops. Those cover crops, we have partners that use the cover crops to make biofuels, and we have other partners that use the cover crops to make construction material. So, for instance, hemp fiber, and that's another component of the carbon, because you can do carbon credits, and that's relative to your geography, because there's not a global carbon trading market. But you can also do green bonds. So you can finance as a commercial entity. You can finance your operations or refinance.
Refinance, yes.
And use green bonds. And there, satellites combined with ERP data from these kind of ecosystems can be used to prove the output, because for a bond you have to for a climate bond or a green bond, you have to release these annual reports that show that the proceeds are used and what the impact is. So you can combine satellite data with ERP supply chain data.
Yes.
From the entities that are taking this carbon and essentially storing it. Because if you put it in a house, it's much safer for the next 60, 80 years than it is in a forest. See all the forest fires we've been having in the past period. Yeah, so that's kind of carbon credits are great where they actually work. We've had a lot of back and forward from the regulatory perspective for carbon credits. So I think there's more work to be done on carbon credits from the governments and the market makers. And there's an existing opportunity in green bonds that maybe a lot of entities don't look at.
Yeah, and I like what you were I think that what comes really, really clearly across the discussion, that there is so much of richness in data, right? If it is from specific spaces, if it is moving individuals, if it is depth in the soil, if it is how healthy the tree is, how much carbon dioxide does it absorb. I mean, there's incredible amount of data which we are able to extract it from a satellite and using space technology. I want to go to a slightly different area, right? I mean, Hans, I saw also on your profile that you spend quite a lot of time as well with educating schools, and so I want to finish because we don't have much time to go, but I want to really think, because ultimately it's about how our next generation, not only us, right, but how do we educate the children around how sustainability, but also utilization of space, because space is still something many of them just see as a Star Wars movie, if I can use that paradigm, right? Or maybe I can't think about any other movie, but Star Trek maybe. Okay, Star Wars, Star Trek, right? So that's space, right? So how do we bring this kind of industry closer to them, and that they also see space economy as one of the key levers towards sustainability?
Yes, so yeah, I'm really glad you are asking this question. And of course, I really love that I generate data and do something great. But personally, what I love the most about my job is that I get to put this satellite data into the living room of people. And users, people are also like children. And we really strategically select the work areas, like the areas where there is a challenge on Earth or we need something. And around each area, we create e-learning materials and a story, educational materials. So what is the region about, a little bit about the history, and what is growing in the region, and what are the challenges for the region. And then, of course, yeah, you are using the people to explore those regions, get to know those regions, and experience it. And because the data we use is always relevant for the task, it is often much newer and recent than what you see in Google Earth, for example. Especially if you go to regions like Africa or South America, then yeah, the data is somewhat older in Google Earth, or the resolution is lower, blurry. But yeah, in reality, of course, the data is just as recent as what we have in America or Europe or other places. But yeah, we immerse the people through our game in those areas, and then they learn about those regions, see the beauty of regions often, what is there to be discovered, and learn about it, and learn about agriculture this way, or how we should treat the country. The next step I want to go to is go further than what we do right now, because right now we are in the moment of measuring. This is already important, and educating, a little bit of a journalistic value, maybe. But what if you engage the crowd even more into decision making, democratization? How are we going to design areas? What would the crowd intelligence say about this? How should we shape a landscape, for example? And a game is a perfect tool for this. And we all maybe know SimCity from history, but we can make it basically real. And the trick is how we do it. Well, we position our game, and unfortunately, at the moment, it is offline because we're in a migration process. But in the game, it is a trick. We position ourselves between the mainstream games everybody plays at their iPhone every day. And this is also why people like it. We use the same game elements in this. And maybe if you're talking financially, we want to go slightly even further. The game is right now free to play, but my dream is that people can spend a little bit of money in the game, but spend it on something real, like a fertilizer for a farmer in Africa.
That's a great interconnection between game. I love that interconnection between gaming and actually social cause, right? Which could impact socially or environment. So when will you release that? Because I think that we should definitely promote it to. That's a good game to play.
Well, yeah, we must first build that part. That is, and of course, and now the technology is there, and like with all the blockchain, so there's some integration needed. And I really want to be very sure that if you spend money on a location in the game, that it ends up at the right location. That
Would you be then able? Hans, would you be when, let's say I spend I spend the money in the game, right? And then if let's say I win, it will give a fertilizer to Cezar. Cezar is a farmer somewhere, right? Or the way around, Cezar. I'm just picking on you because I see you on the screen, right?
That's great. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
would I be then able to use satellite imagery to actually zoom down on Cezar and say, Cezar actually exists, and this is Cezar, and this is his farm, and the fertilizer was actually used there. Would you go into that kind of detail in the user experience from a
Absolutely.
end up in gaming, guys? I don't know how I know about that, but
like if I give to Cezar a pump, for example, and so yeah, like a dozen of gamers is funding a pump, or
yes.
there has to be a pump out there. So Cezar is getting his pump. And we can track that via blockchain. So the gamers are owner, Cezar is the owner. We can even like give Cezar a Internet of Things chip that we know how the pump is used. Give feedback into the game, so the game becomes more fun or more interesting. Cezar will be a happy farmer.
I think this is super fascinating. I think Cezar is changing his job right now to farming, but I think this is absolutely fascinating. It's almost like Twitch, right? Because in Twitch you can select the gamer you support. So here I could select the farmer I support, right? Or the female entrepreneur I support, because it doesn't need to be only farming, right? That application which you just described could be some everybody like Cezar, you described every square meter is different, right? Each of us is different, and we might have different interests and values. So maybe I want to support female farmers only, or female entrepreneurs. I really love that whole user experience. This is super fascinating. Cezar, what is it what you're doing in that space, either on education and bringing this to children, or even on entities?
So right now we're focusing on instructing smallholder farmers, building a flow of data for smallholder farmers that really has to do with their field. So if they're gonna grow durum or tomatoes, or we wanna educate them on that specific topics. What kind of crop rotation options do they have? If they decide to grow on specific types of crop, where they could buy the seeds, what kind of fertilizer and method they could use, what kind of what agronomists they could talk to. So we are really looking at their field, and we want to educate them in relation to that field. And then if they wish to go on a kind of an encyclopedia level, then they'll have that option to learn about new things, future options, because we don't tell them you have to do that. We give them a list. So that's what we're doing on education. It's very laser focused on the issue of the farmer.
I have to say that this is such a high we ending, because I love the tangibility and the call to action, right? On one side, I think, Hans, what you are doing, and even what your plans are, that you involving today half of the world's population is gaming, right? So if a portion of that which have, and we know in our region at least, there's close to 80% people want to make sustainable choices, right? So how could you combine the gaming community with the people who want to do sustainable choices, in combination of utilizing satellite data for doing great things and seeing them? I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I think, Cezar, on your side, that for me as a farmer, it is so tangible and so easy to act and exercise. I think it's really, really great. So I'm excited. I want to see both of the solution in partnership with Mastercard, of course, because I can, it's really brilliant. So we have 1 minute to go. Any final words around, what are some of the key, hopes you have maybe for how can we use space for sustainability? Cezar, I start with you this time.
Well, I can say that we've been talking about Earth observation. That is a small portion. I think the future of sustainability on Earth is in space. All the polluting manufacturing, refining, and mining industries, we can easily, in the near future, move that outside of Earth, and really get back to Earth exactly what we need in the purest refined form for advanced manufacturing. But the really polluting, rare earth mineral refining and mining, all those things we can find outside, and also energy, space, solar, and energy. I think is going to make
massive
people
difference.
trillionaires.
Yeah.
While ensuring energy sustainability and grid flexibility on Earth.
I think we need to run another session just on, because you touch on another topic, which is obviously moving it into space, but also there is a sustainability which is by the waste created in space, which is another obviously super interesting topic. Last thoughts from you, Hans.
Yeah, I think, of course, space is a tool, it is a resource, and it's a very valuable resource. And I acknowledge what Cezar is saying about going into space, because it is also a dream. I have a lot of dreams, so to say. But I think, and I know how much money is going around in the game industry, and we all know it, and people all spend money. And what if you just bend it around to do a little bit for the real world? And I think the gamers would really like it. And all we need to build is that interface and make a true good purpose combining our metaverse with the real world. And I think that solve a lot of challenges, and I'd love to see that happening.
Gentlemen, it was an absolute pleasure having both of you today. Thank you very much for joining us. To the audience, thank you for joining today. I hope you enjoyed the session. I look forward to host you in the next edition. My name is Andrea Pražáková, and it was a true delight to be your host today. Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Cezar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, for hosting us. Super.
Thank you.